Institutions. What are they? According to the American academic Samuel P. Huntington, they are stable, valued, recurring patterns of behaviour. But what does this actually mean? Economists have traditionally defined them as things like property rights, reliable courts of law, banking organisations, and political systems. And that is probably the most common way of defining them. They are organisations and systems that have been created for a long-term purpose to help society. We will refer to institutions in the same way, but it is true that there's no exact definition. So, these things, property rights and the rule of law, banks and political systems, are they important? How can we tell? Arguably, one of the most significant events in world history is the rise of the Western world from the mid-1700s, where Western European and North American nations flew past the rest of the world in terms of GDP per capita and remained dominant until about the 1980s. Why did the West rise to dominate the world? And why did the rest of the world start to catch up from the 1970s to the present day, especially in Asia? Why? Largely because of institutions. Institutions that were invented and reformed over the centuries in Europe and later copied all over the world by countries elsewhere during the 20th century, particularly from the 1970s and particularly in Asia, like Japan. In 1854, it was a farming-based feudal society that would be powerless to refuse the forced opening of Japan to American influence, and so ending 220 years of isolation. And yet by 1970, it was one of the foremost economic and innovational powerhouses on the planet. And all of this because it adopted tried and tested Western institutions. One of the most fundamental institutions was property rights. And this does not just mean your house. Property means anything at all that you own, which could be your car or your phone, or even your glasses. John Locke, a famous thinker in the European Age of Enlightenment, stated about freedom, that freedom is the liberty to order his person, actions, possessions, and his whole property, and not be subject to the arbitrary will of another. Basically, freedom is the ability to have private property, which he can own or sell at will, and that no one can take off him arbitrarily. Private property is the key to a healthy economy because it ensures that all your hard work can go into acquiring possessions and wealth that you know for sure will not be taken away from you by anyone else, even the government. If your stuff can be taken away from you, or if you're not sure your hard work in the present will mean security in a better future, then your incentive to work any more than you absolutely need to survive is seriously hampered. To protect property, countries lay down and strengthen the rule of law, which creates well-defined and established laws so that you can be certain that your hard work will pay off, as everyone is subject to these laws, and everyone has the same rights to their property, no matter who they are. Problems with these institutions like the fair and free rule of law and property rights was partly the inspiration for the founding fathers of the United States to break away from foreign rules and set up a new system where Americans had the freedom to do what they liked. Thomas Jefferson wrote in his first draft of the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and property. He says property because it is such an important institution, which is demonstrated by the final decades of the Soviet Union. It was a surprise to some outside observers when it collapsed, even among its strongest critics. But to most of those who lived behind the Iron Curtain, the writing was on the wall for decades. The reason why is best shown by a popular joke among Soviet workers. They pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work. Productivity was chronically low and the average worker had no vested interest or incentive to work hard. This constitution, upon which the US was built, has been argued to be one of the most significant reasons for why North America would go on to dominate the Americas in the 19th century and eventually the world in the 20th century, while the countries of South America, which would not be founded on such principles, would live in the long shadow cast by the United States. Another fundamental institution is banking. Banking emerged first and foremost with the Medici family in the 15th century, and so revolutionary were their techniques that 2 of their number would go on to become popes, and another 2 to become queens of France. Their innovation of bills of exchange allowed their customers to borrow large sums of money in a time when it was too difficult and dangerous to physically ship these sums across Europe. Traders would deposit their money for a Medici letter of credit, and they were then able to take this to other Medici banks and exchange it for physical money around Europe. from this were the earliest forms of lending and borrowing. People do not realise how important the development of this system was. It would not be wrong to say that the entire world economy is built on it, and here is why. Let's say you give a bank £100, because so many people are also doing that, and it's rare that everyone wants to take all their money out at the same time. That bank might only keep 10% of your money in reserve, so of your £100, it puts £10 away for safekeeping. With the remaining £90, it can lend this out to a second bank. That second bank might take that £90 and again only deposit £9 of it in the bank. It also lends out the remaining 90%, or £81, to yet another bank. At this point, 3 different banks are involved and the total amount of money in circulation is £271, 100 plus 90 plus 81. Out of an original £100, there is now almost £300 in existence. That ability to lend has created money out of thin air. Some might say that's amazing, and the creation of all this money is just that, the creation of economic growth. There is more money to go around, and so overall society becomes richer. The banks lend this money out, and entrepreneurs and normal people use it to do various things like build new houses, start revolutionary business ideas, or just buy a new car. So, it takes time to build up institutions, and over the last century, there has been a slow build-up in institutions in most of the developing world. Do you think your country's institutions are strengthening? Perhaps you'll consider letting us know in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.